Hi, I want to finish Einstein video. It is a 3 hour 20 minute, and we have been through
is noble, but futile utopianism
2
or a
hours
necessary
16
corrective to
minutes.
political cynicism remains debated. Part 8. Human Nature and Ethics, Freedom, Responsibility, and Moral Philosophy. Einstein's views on human nature, free will, and ethics reveal deep tensions between his deterministic worldview and his commitment to moral responsibility. He believed physics showed that the universe, including human behavior, is fundamentally determined by natural laws. Yet he also believed humans are morally responsible for their choices and can improve themselves through reason and education. Reconciling these positions required sophisticated philosophical arguments that Einstein only partially developed. Einstein was a committed determinist about human action. He believed that everything a person does results necessarily from prior causes: genetic inheritance, early experiences, social environment, and physical brain states governed by natural law. Given complete knowledge of these factors, one could in principle predict all future actions. Free will in the libertarian sense, meaning the ability to choose otherwise than one actually does given identical conditions, is an illusion. Einstein expressed this view forcefully in his essay, The World as I See It. He wrote, "I do not believe in freedom of will. Schopenhauer's words, 'A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants,' accompany me in all situations throughout my life." This quote from the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer captures the determinist position. We experience wanting and choosing, but these mental states themselves arise from causes beyond our control. This position followed from Einstein's scientific worldview. Physics describes nature as a network of causes and effects, operating according to mathematical laws. Humans are part of nature, not exceptions to it. Our brains are physical systems obeying the same laws as everything else. Mental experiences like choosing and deciding are produced by brain processes that are themselves determined by prior physical states. The implications seem to undermine moral responsibility. If people cannot choose otherwise than they do, how can we hold them responsible for their actions? Punishment seems unjust if criminals could not have avoided their crimes. Praise seems undeserved if good people could not have done otherwise. Morality itself appears to rest on a mistake, the belief that people control their choices. Einstein embraced a compatibilist response to this challenge. Compatibilism maintains that free will and moral responsibility are compatible with determinism if we define them correctly. Free will does not require the ability to choose otherwise in identical circumstances. Rather, it requires acting according to one's own desires, values, and reasoning without external coercion or internal compulsion. Consider the difference between someone who commits robbery because they want money versus someone forced to rob at gunpoint. Both actions are determined by prior causes, but only the first acts freely in the relevant sense. The first person's action flows from their own character and desires. The second person's action is externally compelled against their will. Compatibilists argue this is the distinction that matters for moral responsibility. We hold people responsible when their actions reflect their character, values, and reasoning. We excuse actions that result from coercion, mental illness, or other factors that bypass the person's rational agency. Whether the person could have done otherwise in some metaphysical sense is irrelevant. Einstein accepted this compatibilist framework but struggled with its implications. He wrote about feeling compassion for wrongdoers because they are as much victims of causes beyond their control as their victims are. A murderer's violent impulses arose from genetics and upbringing that the murderer did not choose. This should generate understanding rather than hatred. Yet Einstein also insisted that society must punish criminals and structure institutions to encourage good behavior. Punishment serves not to give criminals what they deserve, which makes no sense if they could not have chosen otherwise, but to protect society and deter future crimes. We hold people accountable not because they metaphysically deserve blame, but because accountability promotes better behavior. This consequentialist justification of moral responsibility has been widely adopted in contemporary philosophy and law. We maintain practices of praise, blame, punishment, and reward because these practices produce good outcomes, not because people have mysterious libertarian free will. However, critics argue that consequentialist justification fails to capture something essential about moral responsibility. When we blame someone for wrongdoing, we are not merely trying to modify their future behavior. We are expressing that they violated moral requirements and deserve criticism for doing so. This seems to require that they could have done otherwise, not just that blaming them produces good consequences. Einstein's response would likely be that our intuitive sense that people deserve blame is itself an illusion produced by our ignorance of determinism. Once we fully accept that actions are determined, we should abandon retributive attitudes, the desire to make wrongdoers suffer because they deserve it, while maintaining consequentialist practices that promote good behavior. This view faces the problem that human psychology may not work this way. People naturally feel anger at wrongdoers, gratitude toward benefactors, guilt about their own failings, and pride in their accomplishments. These reactive emotions seem essential to human relationships and social cohesion. Can we maintain them while accepting determinism? Some philosophers argue we cannot. If we truly believe determinism, we would lose the reactive emotions that make moral life meaningful. We might intellectually accept that we should still hold people accountable for consequentialist reasons, but we would not feel the emotional engagement that makes accountability personally significant. Einstein's own emotional life suggests this concern may be overstated. He fully accepted determinism, yet still felt moral indignation at injustice, compassion for suffering, and responsibility for his own actions. He believed that understanding determinism should increase compassion, not eliminate moral emotion entirely. We can feel appropriately toward people's actions, while recognizing that those actions resulted from causes beyond the person's ultimate control. Einstein's ethics extended beyond individual responsibility to social justice and human relations. He believed that humans have innate capacities for both selfishness and compassion, competition and cooperation. Which tendencies dominate depends on social institutions and cultural values. Good societies nurture compassion and cooperation through education and just institutions. This environmental emphasis might seem to contradict determinism, which says that education and institutions are themselves determined and cannot ultimately change what is fated to occur. Einstein would respond that determinism does not make efforts at improvement pointless. Our efforts to improve society are themselves part of the causal chain. They are determined, but nonetheless real causes producing real effects. Think of it this way. Predicting that a ball rolling down a hill will reach the bottom does not make the hill slope causally irrelevant. Similarly, saying that social reform is determined does not make reform efforts causally ineffective. They are part of how the determined future comes about. Einstein grounded his ethics in what he called cosmic religion, which we examined in Part 4. The sense of belonging to something vastly greater than ourselves, the cosmos itself, naturally produces ethical behavior. When we recognize our insignificance in cosmic perspective, petty self-interest seems absurd. We identify with the whole rather than narrow ego. This parallels Buddhist ethics, which emphasizes transcending selfish ego through recognizing the impermanent, interconnected nature of existence. Einstein never studied Buddhism deeply, but arrived at similar conclusions from his physics and philosophical reflection. Critics question whether cosmic perspective actually motivates ethics. Recognizing our cosmic insignificance might instead produce nihilism. If nothing matters on a cosmic scale, why bother behaving morally? Helping other humans seems as meaningless as helping individual ants when contemplating the universe's vastness. Einstein's response was that cosmic perspective does not diminish human value, but situates it properly. We are tiny parts of the cosmos, but conscious parts capable of understanding and appreciating the whole. This capacity makes human existence remarkable and precious, even if brief. Ethics involves caring for these remarkable conscious beings and the societies that enable them to flourish. Einstein also believed that rationality naturally leads to ethical behavior. He argued that rational reflection shows that harming others ultimately harms oneself because we are interconnected. Violence, exploitation, and injustice create social instability that threatens everyone. Cooperation and mutual aid produce better outcomes for all. This position, similar to social contract theory and philosophy, assumes that rational self-interest converges with morality. If true, we do not need mysterious moral imperatives beyond natural self-interest properly understood. However, many situations arise where individual self-interest conflicts with collective good. Free rider problems occur when individuals benefit by not contributing to collective goods that require everyone's cooperation. Rational individuals might exploit others' cooperation while not cooperating themselves. Without sanctions or moral constraints beyond self-interest, cooperation often breaks down. Einstein acknowledged these challenges but maintained that enlightened self-interest, understanding long-term and indirect consequences, supports cooperation. Additionally, humans have evolved capacities for empathy and fairness that supplement pure self-interest. These capacities make genuine morality possible, not just strategic cooperation. Contemporary moral psychology research supports this view partially. Humans do have innate moral intuitions about fairness, harm, and cooperation. These intuitions evolved because they promoted survival in social groups, but they are often tribal, favoring one's own group over outsiders, and can be overridden by self-interest or ideology. Einstein's hope that education and reason could strengthen moral intuitions and make them universal rather than tribal has proven optimistic. Moral education shows limited effectiveness in producing consistently ethical behavior. Reason often rationalizes self-interest rather than constraining it. Yet alternatives like moral relativism or nihilism seem worse, abandoning the possibility of moral progress entirely. Einstein's personal ethics emphasized simplicity, honesty, and resistance to social pressure. He lived modestly despite his fame, avoided material accumulation, and spoke truth to power regardless of consequences. He believed that authenticity, being true to oneself and one's values, constitutes ethical life's core. This existentialist element in Einstein's ethics sits somewhat tensely with his determinism. If our characters and choices are determined, what does authenticity mean? Are we not simply being what we must be? Einstein would likely respond that authenticity means acting according to one's own deepest values and reasoning rather than external pressures or superficial desires. Even if these deepest values are themselves determined, acting on them feels different and produces different outcomes than acting on external compulsion. The subjective experience of authenticity matters even if objectively everything is determined. Einstein's ethics also emphasized what he called the merely personal. He argued that excessive focus on personal concerns, reputation, material success, and social status distracts from what truly matters: understanding, creating, and contributing to human welfare. He wrote that striving for personal achievement and recognition is like a pig's life, implying it wastes human potential. This ascetic attitude reflects Einstein's cosmic religion. From a cosmic perspective, personal achievements are insignificant. What matters is participating in the larger project of human understanding and progress. Individual fame and fortune are ephemeral and ultimately meaningless. Critics note that Einstein himself enjoyed fame and used it to advance causes he cared about. His rejection of the merely personal was perhaps not as complete as he claimed. Moreover, completely transcending personal concerns might be psychologically impossible and perhaps undesirable. Personal relationships, accomplishments, and projects give life meaning for most people. Einstein's defense might be that he distinguished between healthy personal engagement and neurotic preoccupation with status and recognition. Caring about one's work and relationships is natural and good. Obsessing over how others perceive you and constantly comparing yourself to others is self-destructive. Cosmic perspective helps maintain this balance by preventing personal concerns from becoming all-consuming. The contemporary relevance of Einstein's ethical views appears in debates about moral responsibility in neuroscience and criminal justice. Brain imaging shows that criminal behavior correlates with specific brain abnormalities and that our actions are determined by brain states we do not consciously control. This revives Einstein's question: how should we respond to wrongdoing if it results from deterministic brain processes? Some neuroscientists argue for eliminating retributive punishment entirely and focusing only on rehabilitation and public safety. This reflects Einstein's compatibilist, consequentialist approach to responsibility. Others worry that abandoning retribution would undermine moral order by failing to express appropriate condemnation of wrongdoing. Einstein's view offers a middle path. Maintain practices of accountability because they serve important social functions, but infuse them with compassion rather than vindictiveness. Understand that wrongdoers are shaped by factors beyond their control, but still hold them accountable to encourage better behavior and protect potential victims. His approach also speaks to contemporary debates about inequality and meritocracy. Meritocracy assumes people deserve their achievements because they worked hard and made good choices. But if choices and efforts are determined by genetics and early environment, which people do not choose, then individual achievements are largely luck rather than earned desert. This determinist critique of meritocracy, which Einstein would likely endorse, supports redistributive justice. If success results from fortunate circumstances rather than moral desert, society should share its benefits more equally. The successful should feel gratitude for their good fortune rather than pride in their superiority. The unsuccessful deserve compassion and support rather than contempt. Critics respond that eliminating merit-based rewards would destroy motivation to work and innovate. Even if achievements are determined, treating them as earned and rewarding them produces better outcomes than treating them as mere luck. Einstein's consequentialist response would likely be that we can maintain incentive systems while acknowledging their philosophical limitations. We reward achievement not because people metaphysically deserve rewards, but because doing so encourages valuable activity. This perspective should make us more willing to provide support for those who are less successful, recognizing that they are not morally inferior, but rather less fortunate. Part 9. Where Einstein was wrong. His failures and limitations. No figure in intellectual history is infallible, and Einstein's mistakes illuminate both his brilliance and its limits. Examining where Einstein went wrong reveals the risks of his methodological approach, the limitations of philosophical commitment over empirical evidence, and how even genius can be constrained by temperament and historical context. Some failures were spectacularly wrong, others subtle but significant. All offer valuable lessons about scientific progress and human fallibility. Einstein's rejection of quantum mechanics stands as his most famous and consequential error. As we explored in Part 3, he spent 3 decades arguing that quantum mechanics must be incomplete because it violated his philosophical principles of realism, determinism, and locality. Every experimental test has vindicated quantum mechanics while contradicting Einstein's preferred alternatives. Bell's theorem proved that Einstein's hoped-for local hidden variable theories are impossible. This failure stemmed from Einstein prioritizing philosophical commitment over empirical success. Quantum mechanics made accurate predictions from the beginning. Rather than accepting these results and adjusting his philosophy, Einstein insisted that a theory violating his principles could not be fundamentally true. This represents a methodological mistake, allowing metaphysical preferences to override experimental evidence. Yet the situation is more nuanced than simple stubbornness. Einstein's criticisms forced quantum mechanics defenders to clarify their interpretation and face conceptual problems they might otherwise have ignored. The EPR paper, though intended to show quantum mechanics' absurdity, eventually enabled Bell's theorem and experimental tests that deepened our understanding. Sometimes being wrong in interesting ways advances science more than being conventionally correct. Einstein's cosmological constant represents a different type of error. When Einstein applied general relativity to cosmology in 1917, his equations predicted that the universe should be either expanding or contracting. This contradicted the prevailing belief in a static, eternal universe. Rather than accepting this revolutionary prediction, Einstein added a term to his equations, the cosmological constant, that produced a static universe. In 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is indeed expanding, exactly as Einstein's original equations predicted. Einstein called adding the cosmological constant his biggest blunder, throwing away the chance to predict cosmic expansion before any observations. However, modern cosmology has revived the cosmological constant to explain dark energy, a mysterious force causing the universe's expansion to accelerate. Einstein's blunder turned out to describe something real, though for wrong reasons. This shows how even mistakes can accidentally capture truth, and how scientific progress is more complicated than simple right or wrong judgments. The error reveals Einstein's occasional willingness to modify theories for philosophical rather than empirical reasons. He wanted the universe to be static and eternal because this seemed more rational than a universe with temporal beginning or end. This aesthetic judgment, like his rejection of quantum mechanics, shows the dangers of letting philosophical preference override mathematical implications. Einstein's failure to appreciate quantum mechanics' revolutionary potential when he was young represents a more subtle mistake. He discovered the photon in 1905, showing that light behaves as discrete quanta in certain circumstances. But he treated this as a pragmatic calculation device rather than a fundamental reconceptualization of nature. He failed to see that quantum behavior was not an anomaly to be eventually explained away, but a completely new physics requiring different concepts. This blindness is understandable given how radical quantum mechanics truly is. But it shows that even revolutionary thinkers can fail to recognize revolution in their own work. Einstein overthrew Newtonian physics, yet could not accept that quantum mechanics might similarly require abandoning his own conceptual framework. Einstein's attempts at unified field theory, discussed in Part 6, consumed his final 3 decades without producing any testable predictions. This represents perhaps his greatest scientific failure, wasting enormous intellectual energy on an approach that could not succeed because it ignored quantum mechanics. The failure reveals the limitations of pure mathematical speculation without empirical guidance. Einstein's earlier successes in relativity came from addressing real physical puzzles using thought experiments connected to observable phenomena. His unified field work lacked this empirical grounding. He was doing mathematical philosophy rather than physics, hoping beautiful equations would reveal nature's secrets. Critics argue that Einstein should have recognized this mistake and redirected his efforts. By the 1930s, quantum mechanics was clearly here to stay, and Einstein's isolation from mainstream physics was nearly complete. He could have contributed to other areas where his insights would be valuable. Instead, he persisted in a program almost everyone considered doomed. Defenders note that pursuing long-shot revolutionary programs is exactly what Einstein did successfully with relativity. He could not have known in advance that unification would fail. The attempt itself, even if unsuccessful, demonstrates admirable intellectual courage. Science advances through such risky gambles, even when they fail. Einstein's political judgments, discussed in Part 7, sometimes reflected naivete about practical politics. His advocacy for world government failed to address realistic concerns about how such a government would avoid tyranny or gain legitimacy. His support for democratic socialism remained vague about implementation, despite Soviet communism's demonstrated failures. His belief that education and reason could overcome nationalism and militarism proved too optimistic. These failures stemmed from Einstein's cosmic perspective, which clarified ultimate values but obscured messy political realities. From the universe's viewpoint, national boundaries are arbitrary and war is collective insanity. But politics operates at human scale, where national identities feel real and security threats feel urgent. Einstein's philosophical clarity about what should be true sometimes prevented him seeing what actually is true about human nature and society. Einstein's personal life revealed ethical failures despite his philosophical sophistication. He treated his first wife Mileva poorly during their marriage and divorce, showing emotional coldness and prioritizing his work over family responsibilities. He had multiple affairs while married. His relationships with his children were distant and sometimes painful, particularly with his son Edward, who developed schizophrenia. These failures show that intellectual understanding of ethics does not automatically produce ethical behavior. Einstein understood determinism, compassion, and cosmic perspective philosophically, but
I want to clarify about his first wife. His first wife, he married her when he was studying in physics, and she was Jewish. Not very nice looking, but she was very, very bright. And some believe she was the woman who put the maths of his relativity theory. But he ignored her. He left her and immigrated to United States. And nobody mentioned his wife. And he has many affairs in his life. I mean, I'm not criticizing him, he's free. But the thing is, I'm not to judge him, but he was teaching ethics and high values, but as a human, he did not apply it. The other point is, as a scientist, he should not have wasted his time and energy for 30 years against quantum mechanics. He should have open mind, because I think the people, they make him so great and genius, just like a dictator. So he start to think that he is, whatever he think is the right. No, you are a human, you are finite, you are fallible, you will do mistakes. He should have open mind. But people, when they become famous, and people, they push them up, they will start to have a grandiosity. And he wanted to make the universe according to his frame of mind, which is a mistake. And this is when I teach about anger, and the Roman philosopher Seneca, he said anger because the person who get angry, his frame of mind about the universe is very hopeful. He wants everything according to his thinking. It can't be. This is out of your control. And this is the teaching of the Greek philosopher Epictetus. We divide things under our control and out of our control. But he tried through his mathematics to create a world which is constant. Everything is changing. And this is established in Buddhist teaching, which I study Buddhism. And so he was a bit arrogant. What I'm sorry about is this brain and this genius, he should not have wasted his time in negativism and against this beautiful theory of quantum mechanics. He should have used mathematics and his genius to support this and prove it if it is right or wrong. And there are so many minds and so many scientists, but he was so proud of himself and he forget. And this is a mistake. This is a psychological mistake. And this happened with the rulers and dictators, especially in Middle East, because everybody said to them yes, yes. So they start to think they are gods. Even if they sign a list to punish people by hanging, they don't have anything because they are right. And they don't know that their brain start not to work well. This is very important. And this is illogic. You will learn what is fact, what is fallacy. And the fallacy is you should not trust a specialist or a genius. Even now when I talk, you should doubt anything and search for yourself. Or think about it. What I teach is right or wrong. Don't trust anybody. And this is the way how you become educated. When you study logic, because most people, they think if this is a specialist, he knows. No, there are so many mistakes. This is one of the fallacy. And if you study logic, and you know the fact and fallacy and causation and effect, cause and effect, then you will be a very good doctor because you know what is going on, and it will be very helpful in treating a human with the problems. Now we will continue.
Struggle to apply these insights in intimate relationships. This gap between theoretical understanding and practical application affects most people, even moral philosophers and enlightened physicists. Some critics argue this hypocrisy undermines Einstein's ethical authority.
Hypocrisy.
How seriously should we take moral advice from someone who failed to live up to his own principles in important ways? Defenders respond that moral failure is human and does not invalidate correct moral insights. Einstein's personal flaws make him more relatable, not less credible. Einstein's views on race, while progressive for his time, revealed limitations by contemporary standards. He opposed racism and advocated for civil rights, using his celebrity to support African Americans facing discrimination. However, his travel diaries contain some descriptions of Asian peoples that reflect Orientalist stereotypes and cultural chauvinism. He described Chinese people in ways that suggest he viewed them as culturally inferior, though he admired certain aspects of Chinese culture. This shows how even someone committed to universal human values can harbor unconscious biases shaped by their cultural context. Einstein transcended much of the racism common in early 20th century Europe, but not all of it. This reminds us that moral progress is gradual, and that people's blind spots often become visible only in retrospect. Einstein's epistemological confidence, discussed in Part 1, sometimes led him astray. His belief that mathematical beauty and theoretical elegance reliably indicate truth worked brilliantly for relativity, but failed for quantum mechanics and unified field theory. There is no guarantee that the universe is comprehensible.
The only one who is philosopher king is the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who wrote the book Meditation, and he wrote it for himself because he was emperor and he was brought up from childhood as emperor. But in his upbringing, they taught him how to be humble. So in the beginning of the book, he will mention what he learned from his mother. from his teachers and from his father, who is an emperor, adopt him from his rich family. So Marcus Aurelius, he is the only philosopher king which is mentioned in the book Plato, the Republic. Otherwise, every other king, they are corrupted by their knowledge, by their limitation, by the people around them, who always say yes. Nobody can open his mouth. And they give them so many values. And I have read an article in the British Medical Journal about politicians. They are appointed without interview. It is just the voting. And this is, according to Plato, is rubbish. Is rubbish. We have to make interview for them. Just like a patient. Or just, no, not a patient, sorry. When I appoint a doctor to look after people, I ask his history, what is his qualification, what is his thinking, how is it his health. I mean, sometimes there are people who are dementia, and they don't know they are dementia, and they are ruling the top job in the country. Or they are obese and diabetic, and it is proven in science, anybody who is obese, the brain is shrunk by MRI. This is very important when we appoint politicians. How do we know them? We don't know them. They just mention what they are going to do. And mostly they are lying. How do I know this? Because I read a book in the 60s, Straight and Crook Thinking, about politicians, how they use emotion to get votes. But once they are in position, they change. So politics is not a clean job, really. It's very complicated. I don't know. It is very complicated. And Aristotle, he thinks it is very, very important job, is even more than medical, because their decision will affect millions of people. They can take people to war or to peace. And it is very important to be aware of what is going on. So everyone should study logic, to know fact and fallacy, to understand what is going on. This is a phone about solar panel, which I phoned many times, and they refuse because this is private company. They ask about age. Anybody should be less than 70, honestly. I don't know. So backwards. So when I walk and see solar panel, I joke. I tell the people walking group, I said they must be less than 70 years old. And now they need work, so they ask, or they forget, so I don't answer them. See the backwardness, see the ageism, sexism. Is a lot of prejudice, and it is must. It will continue like this. Since the age of Socrates, he was chosen the wisest man in Athens by the priestess in Delphi, or Apollo, religious place. And they came to tell him, congratulations, you are the wisest man. And he said, how? I'm not wisest. They said, no, she chose you. So he said, yes, perhaps I am the wisest. Because I'm ignorant, and I know I am ignorant. So I keep learning, and I keep asking why. So he used to go for, in Greece, or in Athens at that time, the politician make speech, public speaking, to take people to war. And Socrates will stand with the crowd and ask a question. Why? What's the advantage? What is going on? Do you know what? Then this speaker, who is big politician, he get fed up. And at the end he said, I don't know. I can't answer your question. But at the end, they judge him. They took him to the court. And the verdict was he has to take the poison hemlock, which is from plant. The reason is, they said, you corrupted our youth. Because he used to walk in the street, bare feet. He sit under and the young people around him, and he teach philosophy. And of course, at that time there are no universities. And even in Plato, he do poems. So one day he saw him. He said, where are you going? He said, there is festival for poems. He said, no, don't do poem, because this is emotional and it is far from the truth. So Plato, he burnt his papers and started to follow him for 30 years. And then he learned so much in philosophy, and he wrote the Republic and 30 dialogues. It is all what was discussed by Socrates, but it is written by his student for 30 years. But there is a book for Plato which is called The Law. It's 2 volumes. People think this is his own ideas. 2 volumes, The Law. And Aristotle was a student with Plato, also 30 years. Of course, Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great, when he used to go to Egypt or to Middle East, he used to send him samples of plants, animals. He sent to his teacher so that he studied and investigated. And of course, Alexander the Great, he liked Babylon. He settled there, which is the city of my birth. And he liked how the people treated him with full respect. And then he ordered 100 generals to marry from that area. And the general would get annoyed because they are all married. He said, no, we have to mix our blood between the East and the West. And he married a princess, which is called Roxana, and she got pregnant, and she delivered a son. And when he died, they took her back to Macedonia. Of course, his body is lost. We don't know where he is buried. And this lady was killed with the son, so that the son will not rule. This is politics. Very dirty business.
Comprehensible to human reason in the way Einstein assumed. Nature might be more messy, contingent, and resistant to elegant unification than his philosophy allowed. Contemporary physics increasingly recognizes this possibility. The Standard Model, while incredibly successful empirically, is considered aesthetically ugly, with too many arbitrary parameters and disconnected forces. String theory attempts to restore elegance, but has produced no testable predictions after decades of development. Perhaps nature at the fundamental level is not elegant by human standards. Einstein's methodological approach of trusting reason and mathematics over experiment worked once in a revolutionary way, but failed when applied repeatedly. This suggests that scientific methodology cannot follow fixed rules. Different problems require different approaches. Sometimes mathematical reasoning ahead of experiment succeeds spectacularly, as with relativity, and sometimes it leads nowhere, as with unified field theory. Judging when to use which approach requires wisdom that cannot be formalized. Einstein's resistance to statistical and probabilistic thinking extended beyond quantum mechanics to other areas. He reluctantly accepted that thermodynamics involves probabilities, but hoped this reflected our ignorance rather than nature's fundamental character. He resisted acknowledging that randomness might be ineliminable from physics. This resistance proved wrong, as quantum mechanics, statistical mechanics, and chaos theory all demonstrated irreducible unpredictability in different domains. His determinism also led him to underestimate consciousness's importance and the hard problem of explaining subjective experience. Einstein treated consciousness as epiphenomenal, a byproduct of physical processes with no causal efficacy. He showed little interest in philosophy of mind or psychology beyond basic behaviorist ideas. Contemporary debates about consciousness, qualia, and whether physical description can fully explain subjective experience did not engage him seriously. This represents a genuine limitation in Einstein's philosophy.
He was not a doctor.
Consciousness is among reality's most undeniable features, yet Einstein's physicalist worldview had difficulty accommodating it. Whether this reflects his error or consciousness studies immaturity remains debated, but Einstein clearly had no solution to offer. Einstein's social vision, while admirable in its idealism, sometimes underestimated cultural diversity's value. His universalist emphasis on common humanity and reason sometimes suggested that cultural differences are superficial and should be transcended. Contemporary multiculturalism recognizes that diverse cultural traditions embody different valuable insights about human flourishing that should be preserved and respected, not dissolved into bland universalism. Einstein might respond that respecting cultural diversity is compatible with recognizing universal human values like dignity, freedom, and welfare that transcend culture. The challenge is balancing multicultural respect with ethical universalism, avoiding both cultural imperialism and moral relativism. Einstein's framework provides resources for this balance, but he did not develop them fully. His faith in science as morally and politically liberating has proven partially mistaken. Science has enabled tremendous human progress, but also environmental destruction, weapons of mass destruction, and techniques of surveillance and control. Scientific thinking does not automatically produce moral wisdom or prevent horrific applications of scientific knowledge. Einstein recognized this late in life regarding nuclear weapons, but his general optimism about science's role in human progress required more qualifications than he provided. Finally, Einstein's cosmic religion, while intellectually sophisticated, may not provide adequate resources for confronting suffering, loss, and injustice. Traditional religion offers comfort through promises of transcendence, meaning in suffering, and ultimate justice. Einstein's Spinozistic God offers only the cold comfort of understanding that everything follows necessarily from natural law. For most people facing tragedy, this provides little consolation. Einstein would likely respond that false comfort is worse than harsh truth. Better to face reality courageously than hide behind comforting illusions. But this response assumes that traditional religious belief is false, which Einstein cannot prove, and that his own interpretation of reality is correct, which quantum mechanics challenges. At minimum, his cosmic religion works better for understanding the universe than for navigating human suffering. These failures and limitations do not diminish Einstein's extraordinary achievements. Every thinker, no matter how brilliant, is constrained by their historical moment, personal temperament, and cognitive limitations. Einstein's mistakes reveal the human face behind the legendary figure, someone who struggled, erred, and persisted despite repeated failure. His willingness to be wrong in pursuit of truth exemplifies the scientific spirit perhaps more than his successes. Part 10, Legacy and Living Debates. How scholars continue fighting over his ideas. Einstein's intellectual legacy remains vigorously contested across multiple disciplines. Physicists, philosophers, historians, and social theorists continue debating what his ideas mean, whether they were correct, and how they should influence contemporary thought. These debates are not merely academic, but shape research programs, educational approaches, and public understanding of science. Einstein, the historical figure, has transformed into Einstein, the contested symbol whose meaning different communities claim for competing purposes. In physics, the primary debate concerns whether Einstein's realist determinist approach to quantum mechanics might ultimately be vindicated. Most physicists accept the Copenhagen or instrumentalist interpretation. Quantum mechanics is a tool for predicting measurement outcomes, and questions about underlying reality are meaningless or unanswerable. A minority pursues Einstein's program of finding more complete theories that restore classical intuitions about reality. This minority has grown recently due to developments suggesting quantum mechanics might not be the final word. The measurement problem remains unsolved, and combining quantum mechanics with gravity requires modifications we do not yet understand. Some physicists argue that quantum mechanics is an effective theory, highly accurate within its domain, but not fundamental, similar to how thermodynamics is accurate, but not fundamental. These neo-Einsteinian researchers pursue theories like objective collapse models, which add genuinely random collapses to quantum mechanics, or pilot wave theories that restore determinism at the cost of non-locality. They argue that Einstein was right to seek theories describing reality independently of observers, even if his specific proposals failed. Critics respond that nearly a century of experimental success makes quantum mechanics extraordinarily well established. Seeking to replace it with classical alternatives reflects metaphysical prejudice rather than scientific evidence. Better to accept quantum weirdness as genuinely how nature is than perpetually seeking failed classical alternatives. This debate will likely only be resolved, if at all, when quantum gravity is finally developed. If quantum gravity restores classical spacetime at the deepest level, with quantum mechanics emerging from underlying deterministic structures, Einstein's intuitions will be partially vindicated. If quantum mechanics remains fundamental with spacetime emerging from quantum processes, the Copenhagen view wins. Current evidence does not decisively favor either position. The philosophical debate about scientific realism continues using Einstein as a central figure. Scientific realists argue that successful theories approximately truly describe unobservable reality, so electrons, space-time curvature, and quantum fields really exist. Anti-realists argue that theories are tools for organizing experience and making predictions, with truth about unobservables either impossible or scientifically irrelevant. Einstein is claimed by both sides. Realists cite his insistence that physics should describe objective reality independent of observers. Anti-realists note his operational approach to simultaneity in special relativity, defining concepts through measurement procedures rather than independent existence. This ambiguity in Einstein's actual position allows both sides to invoke his authority. Contemporary philosophers like Bas van Fraassen defend anti-realism using arguments Einstein would have rejected, but which draw on his operational definitions. Others like Richard Boyd defend realism using Einstein's later arguments about quantum mechanics requiring realistic interpretation. The debate shows how Einstein's work raised fundamental questions that remain unresolved. In Philosophy of Time, Einstein's block universe interpretation of relativity continues generating controversy. Presentists argue that relativity does not actually require eternalism, because simultaneity's relativity only shows that the present is observer-dependent, not that past and future are equally real. They propose various ways of maintaining that only the present exists while accommodating relativity's insights. Eternalists respond that these attempts all smuggle in absolute simultaneity through hidden assumptions. Relativity really does require abandoning the common sense view that the present is uniquely real. This debate connects to physics through quantum gravity proposals that treat time as emergent. If time is not fundamental, then both presentism and eternalism might be mistaken, reflecting our limited perspective rather than ultimate reality. The arrow of time problem Einstein's relativity raised remains unsolved. Why does time have an arrow, a distinction between past and future, if fundamental physics is time symmetric? Proposals range from cosmological boundary conditions at the Big Bang to consciousness creating temporal asymmetry to time reversal symmetry being more approximate than previously thought. None has achieved consensus. Einstein's epistemology continues influencing philosophy of science debates about theory choice. How should scientists choose between empirically equivalent theories that make identical predictions, but differ in their ontological commitments or conceptual frameworks? Einstein emphasized theoretical virtues like simplicity, unification, and explanatory depth. Critics argue these values are subjective aesthetic preferences that do not reliably track truth. This debate affects contemporary physics disputes about string theory and quantum gravity approaches. String theorists argue their theory's mathematical elegance and unifying power make it likely true despite lacking experimental evidence. Critics respond that elegance has led physics astray before, and empirical testing is indispensable. Both sides invoke Einstein. String theorists point to his successful use of theoretical virtues in developing relativity, while critics note his failed unified field theory attempts. In cosmology, Einstein's influence appears in debates about the universe's nature and origin. His relativity provides the framework for modern cosmology, including Big Bang theory, cosmic expansion, and black holes. Yet his philosophical commitments to cosmic rationality and comprehensibility face challenges from findings suggesting the universe might be more contingent and arbitrary than Einstein assumed. The cosmological multiverse hypothesis proposes countless universes with different physical laws, explaining our life-permitting universe as selection bias. We necessarily observe a universe compatible with our existence. This hypothesis troubles many physicists because it abandons Einstein's expectation that fundamental physics should explain why laws are what they are, rather than different. If our laws result from random variation across universes, then physics cannot explain them, only describe them. Einstein would likely have rejected the multiverse as giving up on scientific explanation too easily. But defenders argue that sometimes we must accept uncomfortable implications of successful theories rather than clinging to philosophical preferences. This repeats the quantum mechanics debate. Does physics require philosophical satisfactoriness or only empirical accuracy? Einstein's political philosophy influences contemporary debates about democracy, socialism, and global governance. Progressive movements invoke his democratic socialism and warnings about capitalism's dangers. Critics point out that Einstein provided no realistic institutional proposals and that attempted socialist implementations produced tyranny. Debates about whether democratic socialism is possible or whether it inevitably degenerates into authoritarianism continue using Einstein as a reference point. His advocacy for world government influences contemporary globalism and cosmopolitanism. Proposals for strengthening international institutions, addressing climate change through global cooperation, and constraining nationalism draw inspiration from Einstein's vision. Critics argue that world government threatens freedom, and that national sovereignty, despite its dangers, provides important protection against tyranny. Einstein's framework shapes this debate without resolving it. In discussions of science's social role, Einstein exemplifies the engaged intellectual using scientific authority to promote progressive values. Some scholars celebrate this model, arguing scientists should actively address social problems. Others warn that Einstein's example shows the dangers. His political judgments often exceeded his expertise, and his celebrity gave undue weight to views that were sometimes naive. The contemporary resonance appears in debates about scientists advocating climate policy, artificial intelligence regulation, or biotechnology governance. Should scientists stick to providing information or actively campaign for particular policies? Einstein's example is cited by both sides, as a model of responsible public engagement or as a cautionary tale about overreach. Einstein's determinism influences contemporary neuroscience and criminal justice debates. As brain science reveals the neural basis of behavior, questions about free will and moral responsibility that Einstein grappled with become practically urgent. His compatibilist position, maintaining moral responsibility despite determinism by focusing on consequentialist justifications, shapes reform proposals emphasizing rehabilitation over retribution. Critics argue that eliminating retributive punishment based on determinist arguments risks undermining moral order and failing to express appropriate condemnation of serious wrongdoing. Defenders respond that Einstein-style consequentialism provides adequate justification for accountability while encouraging more humane approaches to criminal behavior. In education, Einstein's emphasis on creativity, intuition, and independent thinking influences pedagogical approaches. Many educational reformers invoke Einstein in arguing against rote learning and standardized testing, advocating instead for encouraging questioning imagination and conceptual understanding. Critics respond that Einstein's genius was exceptional and that most students benefit from more structured traditional instruction. This debate often involves mythologized versions of Einstein rather than careful attention to his actual views. He did criticize authoritarian education, but also valued rigorous training in fundamentals. He thought both creative imagination and disciplined mathematical reasoning were essential, not opposites. But popular invocations of Einstein in education debates rarely capture this nuance. Einstein's relationship with religion continues generating controversy. Atheists claim him as rejecting superstition and embracing scientific rationalism. Religious believers highlight his use of God language and cosmic religious feeling as showing compatibility between science and spirituality. Both interpretations have some textual support, but both oversimplify his subtle position. The contemporary debate about science and religion's relationship often uses Einstein as ammunition without carefully examining his actual views. New atheists, like Richard Dawkins, cite Einstein's rejection of personal God. Accommodationists, like Francis Collins, note Einstein's religious language and awe before nature. Neither camp fully engages his Spinozistic pantheism, which does not fit easily into science versus religion frameworks. In popular culture, Einstein has become a symbol whose meaning varies by context. He represents genius, obviously, but also eccentricity, social conscience, Jewish identity, German-American immigration success, scientific creativity, and absent-minded professor stereotypes. This symbolic Einstein often bears little relation to the historical figure, creating a mythology that shapes public understanding of science and scientists. Scholars debate whether this mythologization helps or harms public science understanding. It provides an accessible face for abstract science, making physics more relatable. But it also promotes misleading hero worship and misunderstanding of how science actually works, emphasizing individual genius over collaborative effort. The question of Einstein's contemporary relevance divides scholars. Some argue his ideas remain at science's cutting edge. Quantum mechanics, interpretation, unified theory approaches, cosmological questions all continue trajectories Einstein began. His philosophical framework about realism, rationality, and comprehensibility still guides much theoretical physics. Others contend that Einstein's paradigm has been superseded. Quantum mechanics shows that classical realism fails. Contemporary physics is comfortable with mathematical formalism without insisting on intuitive physical pictures. String theory and other approaches embrace abstractions that Einstein would have rejected. His influence reflects historical importance rather than ongoing relevance to cutting-edge research. The truth likely lies between these extremes. Einstein's specific theories remain foundational. Special and general relativity are cornerstones of modern physics, tested repeatedly and relied on constantly. His broader philosophical approach, emphasizing unification, elegance, and rationality, continues influencing some researchers, while others pursue more empiricist or instrumentalist programs. Perhaps Einstein's deepest legacy is not any particular theory, but the demonstration that physics can be revolutionary. Before Einstein, physics seemed nearly complete, requiring only minor refinements. He showed that apparently obvious concepts like absolute time and flat space could be wrong, that mathematical reasoning could overturn centuries of scientific consensus, that unification of disparate phenomena was possible. This revolutionary potential that Einstein revealed continues inspiring physicists to question fundamentals and seek radical alternatives. Yet his failures also teach important lessons. Revolutionary thinking sometimes produces breakthroughs and sometimes leads to decades wasted on impossible programs. Trusting theoretical beauty and mathematical elegance works brilliantly until it does not. philosophical commitments can both enable revolutionary insight and create blind spots, preventing recognition of genuine discoveries that violate preferred principles. The ongoing scholarly debates about Einstein reflect deeper uncertainty about science's nature and aims. Is physics fundamentally about describing reality or producing accurate predictions? Should theories be judged primarily by empirical success, or do theoretical virtues matter independently? Can humans ever achieve complete understanding of nature, or must we accept fundamental limits to comprehension? Einstein took strong positions on all these questions, and his successes and failures provide evidence for multiple sides. His relativity shows that theoretical reasoning can achieve deep truth about reality. His quantum mechanics rejection shows that philosophical preference can blind us to empirical discoveries. His unified field theory suggests that mathematical beauty alone is insufficient. His lasting influence shows that asking fundamental questions matters even when answers remain elusive. Future developments will continue reshaping Einstein's legacy. If quantum gravity restores classical space-time as emergent from deeper structures, Einstein's realist program gains support. If quantum mechanics remains fundamental with no underlying determinism, Copenhagen interpretation's descendants win. If unified theory is eventually achieved, Einstein's faith in nature's unity is vindicated even if his specific attempts failed. If physics remains perpetually disunified across domains, Cartwright's patchwork view prevails. What remains certain is that Einstein transformed how humans understand reality and our place within it. His ideas force confronting profound questions about time, causality, determinism, knowledge, and human agency that cannot be avoided. Scholars will continue fighting over his legacy because the issues he raised cut to the heart of what it means to understand the universe and ourselves. Einstein's deepest contribution may be not answers, which remain contested, but questions that reveal how much we still do not comprehend despite our progress. In the end, Einstein embodied the scientific spirit. Insatiable curiosity, intellectual courage, willingness to challenge authority, and commitment to truth, regardless of personal cost. His confidence that the universe is comprehensible, that human reason can grasp nature's deepest patterns, that understanding is worth pursuing for its own sake, continues inspiring scientists and philosophers today. Whether this confidence is ultimately justified remains unknown, but the attempt to answer Einstein's questions, to understand what he understood, and to see further still, drives science forward into unknown territories where new revolutions may await.
Congratulations, the video finished, and I congratulate myself and those people who are interested in the deeper level of epistemology, which is theory of knowledge, and the debate about such great genius, and it is useful. Thank you and goodbye.